Hi, I'm Rosie Surdeville, and the celebrity I want to talk to you about is Joan of Arc. We're fortunate in having a drawing of her that was actually done at the time. Might not be great draftsmanship, but you get a real sense of what she looked like. This was scribbled in 1429, 2 years before her death in 1431. One of the stories that many people have heard about Joan is of her first appearance at court. That moment when she walks in determined to save France, determined to persuade the Dauphin that there is some hope for him, that the British can be defeated. Charles, ever wily, decides that he's going to test whether this woman has actually been sent by God. And he disguises himself. He gets one of his friends to dress in his clothing, and he puts himself right at the back of the crowd. And Joan, with no hesitation, looks round, walks straight up to him, and kneels at his feet. It is proof that she is who and what she says she is. And it is a tale that would inspire her followers in the years that followed. But actually, it's a tale that was manufactured, made up by this woman, Yolande of Anjou, Charles's mother-in-law, an even wilier and smarter political operator than her son-in-law would prove to be. Yolande was the person who'd heard about Joan and who spotted the potential in using this inspiring and exciting and unusual tale, a young woman who had been sent by God to save France, who would lead an army in a way that no woman had ever done before, according to the thinking of the times. And so she arranged the first meeting between Charles and Joan. And she was the person who came up with this marvelous apocryphal story that would go down in history as an example of divine intervention. I think it's actually an example of a very early bit of spin, and the sort of tale that you might expect to find in something like Hello magazine these days.
Okay, so an early example of celebrity spin there. Do we have any questions for Rosie?
Yes. Yes, I have one, Rosie. I was really interested in the little picture of Joan of Arc, and it looked as though she was wearing a dress of mail, or a skirt that was made of chainmail, but the rest of her was just in an ordinary dress. If she'd been a man, do you think she would have been shown in armour? And because when I look at films of Joan, the Bernard Shaw depiction of Joan, she's always in full body armour. But was she deliberately styled to look like a young girl, or was it part of the spin in those days, or what?
Actually, it's probably what she was really wearing. Full body armor is incredibly heavy and sweaty, and you would only put it on before you were about to fight, and you'd get out of it as quickly as possible. Yeah. Your maximum wearing time is about 20 minutes. So unless you were actually hacking at people, you were more likely to be wearing something that would offer you casual protection. And because Joan fought from horseback most of the time, she would have been wearing long skirted mail that would protect her upper thighs from sword cuts from the ground. So the little drawing of her is probably more authentic. We've got this image of body armor from film mostly. And it's quite interesting when you talk to people who wear it for reenactment purposes, and they confirm that you lose water at an astonishing rate when you're in it, even if you're just walking around not doing anything vigorous. So no, definitely she wouldn't have been wearing that all the time.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Do you think that the image that's portrayed in the films has any resonance with the real person, Rosie?
No, they tend to make her far less stroppy, oddly enough. And there's quite interesting material that gets left out. For example, she's shown as being quite reverential about nobility and about high status. Whereas in fact, all the evidence is she didn't give a damn. She was ennobled quite early on in the process, but never actually used her titles, and seems to have been quite disdainful of the whole business. Her family, who were also included in that elevation in social status, do seem to have used it to set themselves up financially. And that's often described in quite disapproving terms. But don't forget, she comes from a family that had almost nothing to start with. Trying to use the resources available to them seems like quite a canny move. And it kind of reinforces that idea we were talking about of celebrity and what celebrity status can do for you. You know, we see it today, lots of people who actually manage to improve their lives by using it as a kind of livelihood.
Thank you. Interesting.
Actually, I was wondering about this whole idea of celebrity. I'm thinking about, you know, you go back to even the hieroglyphs in the pyramids. I'm just wondering, do you feel it's something that's innate in humans that we've got to look for? I suppose it's like the alpha male, alpha female kind of thing. Do you see it as something that would happen anyway, or do you think it's something cultural?
I think it's a bit of both. We like having people to admire. We turn people into hero figures. Sometimes we even turn them into leaders. And people have worked out very early on that if you like being the center of attention, using that idea of celebrity to get further attention really works. There's a classic example on one of the ancient Egyptian tombs where it's Ramses the Great, I think, has himself portrayed as single-handedly winning the Battle of Kadesh. You know, he's not simply having his celebrity status spun up for the generation that he lived with. He wants the ones who don't even get into that tomb in the future life to hear about it. This is who he is.
Yeah. Kind of the opposite of the Oscars speech, isn't it? Where everybody thanks everybody.
Yeah, me.
Do we have any more questions for Rosie? Yeah. Thanks so much.
Just one more question. How do the French see her now? Do they see her a rebel, a warrior, a partisan, a saint? What's the contemporary impression of her now, Rosie?
There are two elements to it. One is the religious view of her as a saint, but the other is her as a symbol of national identity, along with the symbol of Marianne, that figure from the French Revolutionary period who's portrayed going into battle holding the flag. She has become one of the ways that you describe French identity. And one of the really interesting manifestations of that is the use of that little drawing, because in film and in previous paintings, you've got this sort of very neat, well-arranged set of regular features. The little drawing shows a very Gallic nose. And suddenly that is really popular because that is a real French woman. And I think that's got a huge amount to do with why you suddenly can get a hold of copies of that little drawing.
Fantastic. Any more questions? Well, thanks a lot, Rosie.
You're welcome.
Really interesting, and it's given us a really long perspective. Very shortly, we're going to go over to Tom Davey, who's going to talk about much more modern celebrities. One from, I guess, the 1970s, 1980s, and two from Second World War era, and I suppose that they were already celebrities before that, but I'll let Tom explain that shortly.